There's something about the quiet, the solitude, and the moonlight filtering through the trees that I find incredibly peaceful. That all changed one night last summer. I was hiking a familiar trail in the nearby woods. It was around midnight, and the full moon cast an eerie glow on the path ahead. I had my flashlight, but I preferred to rely on the moonlight whenever possible. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. As I walked deeper into the woods, I felt a strange sensation, as if I were being watched. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. After all, I'd hiked this trail dozens of times without incident. About an hour into my hike, I came across a clearing. The moonlight illuminated the area, revealing an old, dilapidated cabin I had never seen before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a closer look. As I approached the cabin, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was even more decrepit than the outside. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust covered every surface. I shone my flashlight around the room, revealing a few pieces of broken furniture and a fireplace filled with ash. I was about to leave when something caught my eye, a journal lying on a small table in the corner. I picked up the journal and opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was barely legible. As I flipped through the pages, I realized it belonged to someone named John, who had lived in the cabin years ago. The entries were mundane at first, detailing John's daily activities and thoughts. But then, the tone changed. July 15th. Strange noises outside the cabin last night. Sounded like whispering. Couldn't sleep. July 20th. Saw someone or something standing in the woods watching me. Disappeared when I called out. July 25th. It's getting closer. I can hear it breathing outside my window at night. The final entry sent chills down my spine. August 1st. It's inside the cabin now. I don't know what it wants, but I can't leave. If anyone finds this journal, beware the midnight hiker. I closed the journal, my heart pounding. The air in the cabin felt oppressive, and I suddenly had the overwhelming urge to get out of there. As I stepped outside, I noticed the forest had gone eerily silent. The rustling leaves and hooting owls had ceased, leaving an unsettling stillness. I started back down the trail, my pace quickening with every step. The feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but I saw nothing, just shadows dancing in the moonlight. Then I heard it, a faint whispering sound, just like John had described in his journal. It seemed to be coming from all around me, growing louder and more distinct. I couldn't make out the words, but it sent shivers down my spine. I broke into a run, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The whispering grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, my heart pounding in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the woods and into the safety of my car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sat there, catching my breath. The whispering had stopped, and the forest was silent once again. I never went back to that trail. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had haunted John was now following me. I still hear the whispering sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet. It serves as a chilling reminder of that night in the woods and the warning left behind by the midnight hiker. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, and demons were all just stories to scare children, or so I thought. That belief changed last winter, after a series of events that I still struggle to comprehend. It all started when I moved into a new apartment. It was a quaint, old building with a lot of character, high ceilings, large windows, and an antique feel. It was perfect for someone like me, who had a soft spot for things with a history. I didn't think much about the rumors of the place being haunted. They were just stories, right? The first few nights were uneventful. I spent my evenings unpacking and getting settled in. It was on the 5th night that things started to get strange. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was about to turn off the bathroom light when I noticed something odd in the mirror. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps I was just tired. But as I looked closer, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me. It was faint, barely visible, but it was there. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, the shadow was gone. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the next few days, the shadow appeared more frequently. It was always just a fleeting glimpse, gone as soon as I turned around. I started to dread looking into mirrors, but curiosity always got the better of me. One night, I decided to do some research on the building. I found out that it had been a boarding house in the early 1900s. There were stories of people who had died under mysterious circumstances, but nothing concrete. Just vague rumors and old newspaper clippings. Then, one evening, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, standing in front of my bathroom mirror with the shadowy figure clearly visible behind me. My blood ran cold. I had no idea who sent it or how they got my number. I started to feel paranoid. Every time I looked in the mirror, I expected to see the shadow. It was always there, lurking just out of sight. I began to hear whispers too, soft and indistinct, like someone was standing right behind me, murmuring in my ear. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my apartment. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I grabbed my phone and crept out of bed, my heart pounding. The footsteps were coming from the bathroom. I approached slowly, trying to stay calm. The door was ajar and I could see the light from the hallway reflecting off the mirror. As I pushed the door open, I saw it, the shadowy figure, standing in front of the mirror, staring at me. This time it didn't disappear when I looked directly at it. It stayed there, its dark, featureless form filling me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I backed away, my mind racing. I had to get out of there. I ran to the front door, fumbling with the lock in my panic. As I pulled the door open, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned to see the shadow right behind me, closer than ever before. I bolted out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I was several blocks away. I ended up crashing at a friend's place that night, too terrified to go back. The next day, I contacted my landlord and told them I was moving out. I didn't care about the lease or the deposit. I just wanted to be far away from that place. I found a new apartment within a week and moved in immediately. Since then, I've never seen the shadow again. But I still can't bring myself to look into mirrors for too long. I'm afraid that if I do, I'll see it again watching me, waiting for the right moment to return. Ever since I was a kid, my family had a cabin in the mountains. It was our little getaway, a place to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. We'd spend weekends there, hiking, fishing, and enjoying the great outdoors. It was a peaceful retreat, until last autumn. That fall, I decided to take a solo trip to the cabin. I needed a break from work, and the thought of spending a few days alone in the mountains sounded perfect. I packed my bags, loaded up the car, and headed out early on a Friday morning. The drive was uneventful, and I arrived at the cabin just before noon. The air was crisp, and the trees were a riot of colors, reds, oranges, and yellows. It was picture perfect. I spent the afternoon hiking and taking photos, enjoying the solitude. As evening approached, I made my way back to the cabin. I built a fire in the fireplace, cooked a simple dinner, and settled in with a good book. The sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the room. It was cozy, just like always. But then, as the night grew darker, I started to feel uneasy. It was a subtle feeling at first, like something was slightly off. I chalked it up to being alone in the woods and tried to ignore it. Around midnight, I decided to go to bed. I turned off the lights and climbed under the covers, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the window. I sat up, my heart pounding. The tapping continued, steady and insistent. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it towards the window, but saw nothing. The tapping stopped as suddenly as it had started. I lay back down, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe it was just a branch hitting the window, I told myself. I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next morning, I decided to explore the area around the cabin, hoping to find a logical explanation for the tapping. As I walked around, I noticed something strange. Footprints in the dirt leading from the edge of the forest to the cabin and back again. They were human footprints, but something about them seemed off. They were too large and spaced too far apart. I spent the day trying to put it out of my mind, but the unease lingered. That night, I made sure all the doors and windows were locked before going to bed. Just as I was about to drift off, the tapping started again. This time it was louder and more insistent. I got up, flashlight in hand, and walked towards the window. As I approached, the tapping stopped. I shone the light outside, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. I turned to go back to bed when I heard a low, guttural growl coming from the woods. My blood ran cold. I backed away from the window, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The growling grew louder, closer. I could hear footsteps approaching the cabin, heavy and deliberate. I ran to the fireplace and grabbed the poker, holding it like a weapon. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I stood there, heart racing, waiting for something to happen. Then, the door handle started to turn, slowly, deliberately. I tightened my grip on the poker, ready to defend myself. The door creaked open and I braced for the worst, but nothing came through the door. I cautiously stepped forward, flashlight in one hand, poker in the other. The door was open, but the porch was empty. I shone the light into the darkness, but saw nothing. I closed and locked the door, then backed away, my heart still pounding. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the fireplace, too scared to sleep. At first light, I packed up my things and left the cabin, vowing never to return. I don't know what was out there that night, and I don't want to find out. The cabin is still in my family, but I've never gone back. The memory of that night haunts me, and I can still hear the tapping on the window and the growling in the woods whenever I close my eyes.